I am David Elder, Wealth Manager with Merit Financial Advisors, and excited to have y'all here, and also welcome our guest Amber Saunders, estate planning wizard and attorney. And we're going to be talking about the concept of a family brand and family constitution today. And so if you think about those two items and what comes to mind with it, what I think is really cool about these is it's more of a eternal, long-lasting thing and not just a temporary thing in your life. So here's what I mean by that. You are the person that you are throughout your entire walk of life. As an investment advisor, there may be changes along the way from the political, social, economic environment that may make us want to invest differently a year from now than we do today. You know, as an estate planner, there may be changes in estate planning law that will make Amber want to update your documents different in the future than the way they're set up today. In fact, our last presentation, we talked about that. What are some of the estate planning changes we see possibly happening throughout the blue wave? But if you think about this idea of a family brand and a family constitution and putting this together right, what's amazing is you can't control the economy. You can't control what comes out of Washington. You can't control what happens in financial markets, but you really can control who you are. And that's the brand side of things. And you also can control how you conduct business as a family. And that's the constitution side. And as I was thinking about this, I thought about some of the things that maybe go into my family brand and family constitution. And what I realized is those are really kind of the foundations of how we conduct our family. And to have anything written out and organized as an advisor, I know that makes it happen. When people have their plans on paper, those plans get executed. When people have plans in their head, it's easy for those plans to stay in their head. So let's go through this idea of putting this on paper, or really just thinking through it, because whether you know it or not, you're creating a family brand and a family way of doing business, regardless of if it's intentional or not. I had a funny thing this past week where I saw an unintended consequence I was having. So I'll tell this story, and then I'll tell a good story, and then we'll jump into the presentation. So an unintended consequence of a family brand. You know, your children watch you. We all know this. Anybody that has kids has seen the way that whatever they do eventually comes out of their kid's brain. I actually saw a funny Father's Day card this week where this kid was in a little Hot Wheel, started cussing at the car next to him, and the remark was, "See, he does listen to what you say, Dad." I thought that was kind of funny. But something funny that happened with my son this week, and you know, all y'all on the call will know kind of where you fall on this spectrum. There are people that are the handy dad.
How did you want to hear this? Family constitution. This is for
this nasty white man is property.
Somebody needs to mute there.
Read it.
No.
Read it.
Okay, thank you, whoever that was. So, you know, there's the dads that even if they had all the money in the world would never hire somebody to cut their yard, or, you know, if they're...
I got to respond to
Hey guys, somebody's not on mute. If you don't mind muting.
There we go. Thank you, Matthew. Looks like you got it. You know, if they have a plumbing issue, let's say you're going to put in a new sink, they're going to do that themselves. You know, they love it when wood's wearing out on their fence because that gives them a project to work on. I am not that dad. I want to spend time with my family, but hire it done as far as house maintenance. I'm just not handy. And if I start a project, I'll probably mess it up. So my son had a friend over this week, and he's gotten in this phase, he's 6 years old, where he collects bugs, and he wanted a caterpillar. And his friend that came over actually lives on a horse farm, so this kid knows how to do things with animals that, like, you know, most kids don't know how to do. So anyway, my son hired his friend. He said, "Mac, I'll give you $12, and he'd been saving up for an allowance and some stuff he got at Easter. He goes, "Mac, I'll give you $12 if you go catch me a caterpillar." And lo and behold, he sat there and watched his friend catch him a caterpillar. And I thought, oh my gosh, what are we training? But it was a funny thing where you learn that they're learning lessons that maybe you don't even know they're learning. So anyway, just because that happened recently, I thought I'd go ahead and show it. And then Here is Chris Smith. And Amber, why don't you tell us a little bit about, an introduction from you and then also who Chris Smith is.
Okay, good. Good morning. My name is Amber Saunders. I am an estate planning attorney with Naulo Saunders, and it is our mission at the firm to make every child a trust fund baby. And so we work with professionals like David Elder to try and get those things done. And so we wanted to get together regarding this presentation about family branding and constitution. I was actually introduced to Chris Smith by Mr. Elder, hadn't heard of it before. Chris Smith is the founder of the Campfire Effect. The family brand, he says, is a crucial driver to create healthier connections, better leaders, prosperity, etc. And so we thought this idea was interesting and something that we should present to you guys today. I know David might have additional things about it, but it's really interesting. It's a really good book that you guys might consider taking a peek at.
Yep. All right, so let's dive into that, and I would absolutely recommend reading this, especially if you're, getting to go to the beach or something fun this summer that maybe you didn't do last summer. So, all right, so the benefits of a family brand, and as we talked about it earlier, family brand is really kind of the who you are. The Constitution side is more of the how do you execute your business. And so if you look at this, and especially things that jump out on this slide. So Amber, you deal all day with threats to people's wealth, right? And as we know, when people inherit money, man, people can come for that stuff right and left. Sometimes the threat is their own spending habits. Give us some examples from your practice of how thinking through these types of things of who people are can really mitigate some threats.
In my mind, the biggest threat that I see, and I know, as you mentioned, people think of monetarily or otherwise, but I think the biggest threat is to relationships, because if things aren't clearly outlined, then what someone's intent might be can be misinterpreted. I've seen, when someone passes away, people coming into the house and putting Post-it notes on things that they think belong to them and different things like that. But I think that when you have a brand and you have an understanding across the family of what the family stands for, how things are done, then it can mitigate that. It can make things easier when there are people who have various problems. It could be substance abuse, things like that, how you handle those things together as a family. It gives clarity. And as David mentioned earlier, when things are written down, then it's not left up for interpretation. And when things are left up for interpretation, there are different interpretations almost always.
Yeah. So, and I'm thinking stronger connections here also. And really, I think without my family's brand, and it's something that seemed very abstract when you hear it first, and then you start thinking, God, what are the pivotal events in my life that have really made me who I am? And stronger connections, I'll give you a great one here. When I was in college, it was really the first time I started thinking about money like an adult. I mean, obviously in college, I think of a lot of things for the first time like an adult. It was a time where my parents had probably budgeted for me to go to a place like UGA on a Hope Scholarship, and I ended up throwing them a curveball and going to a private school up in Nashville, Belmont University. And at that point in time, I saw my parents struggle financially more than I'd ever seen in my life. And I just remember, out of the love they had for me, but also the stress I could see on my dad, but my mom just constantly saying, we're going to stand behind you and stand behind you achieving your goals, and we will find a way to make it work. And that was so comforting. And later on in life, my wife and I had some financial struggles, and none of us go through life without them, I think, at some point in time. I mean, even the wealthiest among us, I remember an advisor one time pointing out, he goes, do you really think Jeff Bezos has financial peace right now? And this is when Jeff Bezos was going through his divorce. And think about it, the guy had more money in the world than anybody else in the world at that time, but he was probably stressed about his finances. And, my wife and I later on, when we had newlyweds, marriage was going great, but then some fertility issues, and at a point where that was a huge financial struggle for us, I remember thinking back on those basically the same way my mom did my college education, which is we're going to make this work, and meeting the goals of the family is more important than these financial burdens. And, how important is that for that connection that kind of allowed me and my wife to have versus maybe fighting at different times? And then on the increased net worth, I will say this, and Amber, you've probably seen this a lot. I'd like to hear some color from you, but even in wealthy families, and a lot of what we try to do is study what some of the wealthiest families in the country and world are doing and bring that down to a lower level so that, you can learn, you don't learn to invest by watching, the guy next door. You learn to invest by watching Warren Buffett, right? I mean, that's how you do it. And take those ideas and bring them down. And one of the things you find is even in the wealthiest of families, it's often the first generation that creates the wealth, a second generation that preserves the wealth, and a third generation that squanders the wealth. And so if you can change that trajectory, your legacy can really be more of a financial benefit instead of something that's squandered. And have you seen that in your practice, Amber, just out of curiosity?
Absolutely. But I think that if you plan and as a family with those things in mind, I think that there are ways that you can work through that. So for example, with estate planning or with investment planning and things like that, putting certain parameters in place. If you think by third generation or by second generation, things might change, you can try and plan for that. One, by educating those people in the next generation to try and prevent it. And two, by putting some mechanisms in place to try and make sure those things aren't, squandered as quickly as they might be otherwise.
Yep. And what's interesting, it's amazing. You can do a lot of that with the trust, correct? But sometimes you got to have the education around it too, because even though something's set up, if people aren't educated, they might be resentful of those trusts and things like that, right?
Absolutely. And I think that we're using the word brand, but I think also, like in my family, we have certain rules. And I think I was talking to you about it, David, before, like when you were saying stronger connections and different things like that, like it's a rule in my family, although it probably wasn't spoken, that no one goes into a home. My great grandmother stayed in the house with my grandmother when she got older. My grandmother, like all in our family house, my grandmother, my grandfather, and my step grandfather all lived in the house together at the same time. My mother and my uncle took care of them. My uncle moved back to Massachusetts from Atlanta to take care of them because we weren't sending them to a home. Like that's just something we decided as a family we weren't doing. So we never thought about it as a brand. We just did those things. And I think it goes back to what you said, stronger connections, increased net worth, all of those things, kind of like just having rules and knowing everyone's going to follow them. And that's what we just decided together.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that's why I went ahead and moved this on over the next slide, because, it is also, the culture you put around that stuff, right? A culture of taking care of each other. As a sidebar, in my family, you're going into a home. That's just going to happen to you, and we expect people to plan early enough that it doesn't, cause trouble. But that's neither here nor there. Maybe I'll be the one that changes that. Language. Think about that. The brand your language causes, and I will tell you, I've just in general met, and I'm going to bring this back to investing in a second. You meet people that are optimistic people and people that are pessimistic people, and it's a household of, wow, that seems hard. I don't know if you can do that too. Of course you can do that. Or, the way you talk about education really will determine, does your child get through college or not? The way you enforce that culturally. Investing, I cannot tell you how many times I meet people who are really skittish about the markets, and you talk to them about where they learned that from, and it was a parent that had a bad experience, maybe made a bad investment, lost a bunch of money, the depression era thinking that goes back down. Why are you holding cash in your safe? Well, my dad was a cash person. All these things that do come down. And then, experiences. And I know one in my family, and Amber, I'd like to have you share your story about Thanksgiving, but I know one of the big experiences in my family is beach trip we all take together to Ponte Vedra each year. We've been doing it for about 35 years, actually. And kind of a funny way we started, we lived in Jacksonville at the time, and my parents figured out that every time we go on vacation, the kids get sick. So why not just stay close to their pediatrician? And so we went out there and then liked it. My mom has said her wish for my sister and I is that, yes, we get to inherit her money, but that we'll make sure we continue up that trip. And obviously, my sister and I could decide we don't want to do that. But I think that's in our culture. I think that's in our experience. I think that's in our family brand, and we will keep doing that. And that'll be something that always pulls the culture together. On the experience side, Amber, you guys have a cool story about Thanksgiving. I'd love to hear.
Well, yeah. So I'm an only child, and my parents are divorced. They've been divorced since '82. But my mother, like my father's side of the family, he has 6 siblings. My mother only had 1. And so I, as the only child, always wanted to spend Thanksgiving up with my dad's side of the family because there were so many people. It was like a big celebration. Everybody cooked. We did karaoke, all of this stuff. And so like the tradition is we're always going to dad's house. Like we're always going to Ohio because one, who wants to sit there with just my mother and I for Thanksgiving? Like, that's not fun. Like she has to go. And so even with my dad's been remarried, my mother is still considered a part of the family. Like it's our thing. Once you're in our family, you're in it, even if y'all get a divorce, even if you're whatever. So my mother flies up there for Thanksgiving. Like it just has to be done because I don't want a sad Thanksgiving with just the 2 of us. And my mother's vegetarian now, which is fine, but I'm not. So we got to go where all the meat is so that I can enjoy my Thanksgiving. So every Thanksgiving we go to Ohio, Christmas here because it snows up there, but every Thanksgiving we got to go, no matter what they have going on.
And it's awesome y'all have that as kind of a rock. Culturally, in my family, if you're an ex-spouse, you're like excommunicated. So goodbye. You would not be at our Thanksgiving, but different families. Of course, it probably depends on the ex-spouse. We have some crazy ones, not ones you still want around.
Well, it's been since 1982. I'm pretty sure they worked that out by now. They should have.
Yes, ma'am. All right. So we got a trivia question coming up here. And Juliana, if you'll keep an eye on the chat here. And we'll just do the first person who can write this in. But Chris Smith wrote a book talking about the family brand and family constitution. Who remembers what that book's title was? For a $10 e-gift card. Can't hear you, Juliana. Yes. Still can't hear you, Juliana. All right. Well, Juliana just has to be in chat there. Yes, the campfire effect. All right. AA4185. Make sure that Juliana, you can email her at, Juliana, go ahead and type in your email address there for her. Just email her and she will make sure you get your $10 gift card and we will go from there. Awesome. All right. So we the people. So you put together this kind of concept of who you are. And then you got to figure out how you're going to execute it. And I'll give you a great example of this. So as a family, we know we want to save a certain amount. We know we want to give a certain amount. But it's a lot harder than just having that goal and putting that in on an automated system. If you're going to save money and you're going to give money, you also have to figure out how you're going to spend money. And if you spend too much of it, it is not going to work well on the saving and giving side of things, right? Simple math. So one thing my wife and I do, and we started this way before apps were cool. I mean, really, it was way before the iPhone existed, is we basically have a checkbook ledger that we write our expenses on, and we meet once a week to run through where are we at for the month, what else do we see coming up? Because one of the first things we figured out in marriage is, it's easy to budget for yourself, but when you have another person involved, you don't know necessarily what he or she's going to spend. And so you need to know, things are coming up. So I'll give you a good example. I was reviewing our budget this week and all of a sudden, $342 for soccer. Well, that's because my wife signed up my kids for soccer in the fall, and paying attention to that dictates what I can spend on other things, right? And so that's an example of the Constitution. We will commit to this meeting once a week to make sure that happens. And I will tell you, there are times we don't do it well. A lot of times over vacation or holiday, and we just don't have the meeting. And guys, I'll confess, our cash flow isn't as organized then. Sometimes it works out automatically, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes we end up fighting about it. And so, that keeps us grounded. And there's a whole bunch of other decisions you have to make. So many things in families that, need to have a method and a procedure, shall we say. So it helps avoid resentment when you have this plan. I mean, think about the resentment that comes from two spouses when they're trying to control the other's spending. Not good. And so to avoid the resentment, you've got to be a team and avoid potential damage to the family's financial future. So let's talk about, and to me, this prevent conflicts that diminish fortunes. I mean, Amber, you've seen so many things, like especially on the probate side where, oh my gosh, people can just fight over stuff.
Yes. Most of the stuff that I deal with is to try and prevent the fighting. So, but every once in a while, if something happens to a client, we will try and help manage the probate. And in those instances, I mean, we've seen a lot of the issues that I've seen is often when they feel like a family member feels like one person is more responsible than the other. And then they either make a sibling the fiduciary over all the funds, and then everyone else is upset because they thought they should be, or they don't feel like their brother is giving them enough money, or they're mad at and it turns into a big fight because they aren't clear on that the brother, is stuck or bound by the documents and things like that. A lot of it is they don't necessarily know. And then it turns into a big fight when things are left ambiguous. So like making things as clear as possible. So it's clear to everyone in the family that we're following the rules that whomever laid out for us. It's not this person picking and choosing who gets what, can help with a lot of infighting in advance. I mean, writing down as much as you can is very helpful. Now you can't always prevent people from fighting, but it can go a long way to minimize it as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, just things like, okay, we always give a certain amount of our income. We, you have this in writing, and so you stay to it. We go to church on a weekly basis. We go to, and you think about that. I mean, if that's in your family constitution, over time, that's by default going to impact your family brand, right? It's going to raise your kids a certain way. We promote education. Therefore, if I say I'm going to promote education for my kids, now I've locked myself into a financial goal where I have to save for their college, right? Or unless I want to give them debts, but I don't. I want to be able to have them pay for that college. And so, taking this from the abstract to written down is actually a step I think can be very useful for a lot of people. Just as far as sometimes the hardest thing for us to do in life is clarify our goals. And then once you do that, you start living with vision and intent and really live a life of significance. And so, a couple aspects that we think should be in the family constitution, and some of them, it's pretty straightforward. It's what is the process? Just like I said, my wife and I do the budgeting book every week. But some of the bigger ones, I mean, we've already talked about it kind of in a funny angle on this call. But first of all, who's defined as family? And that seems straightforward, but it's not always straightforward. Amber's family apparently has a different definition than my family. What do a lot of your clients think? I mean, I always think like, all right, my son or daughter gets married. While they're married, they're certainly their spouse's family. But if they got divorced, at least for me, from a financial situation, their spouse is no longer family. So even if like my son inherited my money, if he gets divorced later on, I want that to stay with him, not go 50-50 to her. What are some steps you see, or even some family members that people in your practice struggle to figure out how to define, and then how do they do that?
Well, I mean, everyone's definition is everyone's definition. Like just like our family has different. I'm probably a bully about it. I'm like, my mom's coming, so we gotta. I know she's the ex-spouse, but unless you have a forceful child like me, like it might not work. So everyone's definition is different. And so trying to be clear on who's or who is a part of that. Now, I think financially she'd be excluded, but she can have some macaroni and cheese, things like that. But I think everyone has to try and figure that out. But I know a lot of what we do. I mean, I've had a client who they adopted 3 kids with their ex-spouse and then got a divorce. And they haven't necessarily, those children though were legally adopted and can inherit. So he wanted to disinherit them because they're so I mean, even though, because the relationship changed and those kids went with the mother, they don't really have a relationship. So it just depends on everyone's definition, doesn't necessarily have to be the same. I think it's good to talk through it again or write it down. One of the things that we try and do, I think I mentioned to David, is when we're doing guardianship documents, we have this questionnaire. If something happened to you today, what do you want your children to know about what your religious beliefs are, who you want them to be as a person? And I found often that couples haven't necessarily talked about that. Like, what are the shared values you have? And what do you want them to know about hard work and about whether or not they're entitled to a certain amount of money, or if they have to go to school, if it's your expectation for them. And so like, it's kind of a thick document. Sometimes it takes people weeks to go through because they haven't sat down with their partner to go over those kind of things. But like asking yourself those questions can kind of that kind of becomes your constitution. Because once you talk about it, it's like now we kind of have to live up to whatever this ideal is that we have in our head for our family.
Yeah. Well, and I think on this defining family, how could that possibly change over time or not? I have a couple of clients, and this is with biological children, that for whatever reason they've decided to disinherit them. And, I personally feel like that's a mistake. I feel like, you're taking an emotion you have now and basically like applying that to them forever. But that's their way of doing it. And because of something that happens, that's how they want to define their family. And obviously, something like that needs to be pretty thoroughly in writing for it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Ideology of the family. How does the family think about things? And then also defining reasons for staying together. That's a pretty powerful one, and I don't know over, especially the last year, if any of y'all struggled with this, but, sometimes when you're spending all your time with family, it was good to remind each other why that's so important. And also, remembering, like with my sister, for example, if we don't keep up that trip, how that could fade away. So he would be goal with that. Memorialize the family principles and values. Establish checks and balances among different interests, as well as ways to address conflicts and communications of protocol. This, to me, especially, and you work with a number of business owners, Amber, I think this is so important, especially if like there's a family business or something like that involved, where maybe one sibling's taking it over, the other's not. Obviously, there's going to be some value that goes with that business. How does the other sibling get treated? How do you do that with no bitterness and everybody happy?
Mm-hmm. That's
promote accountability among family members, and then ensure flexibility so the family can adapt to change. And gosh, if this year hasn't taught you anything, it's that things can change more than you realize. And when that happens, you've got to adapt to it.
I agree. I have a quick story. I think, so again, we never called it this, but there were expectations. My junior year of college, I went to school in France, and my mother, she made me, before I could ask, like I knew my mother needs to know everything. I made like I don't think there was PowerPoint then, but like I made a big board and I wrote what the cost was and all those things for her to say yes, for me to be able to go, how much it was going to cost for college, et cetera. So she gave me a budget. She gave me a certain amount of money that I would have when I went over to France. I spent it in a month. And I knew, based on our rules and my mother's constitution, there was no way I could ask her for this money because she gave me my budget for the semester. So I had to get back home for Christmas. There was if I called my dad, he was going to tell her. So I had to figure it out. So I ended up being a nanny for a family. Like I found someone in the village where the school was, and I got a job because there was no way. I knew the rule. My mother gave me this budget. We had gone over budgeting. I knew way better than to buy all these clothes, but it was expected of me to make sure I managed that money well. And when I didn't, I just had to adapt. Like I knew the rules. The Constitution was clear. Do not call your mother or anybody in the family now that you squandered this money. And so, I mean, it can work all sorts of ways. I mean, your kids can know what's expected of them should they make mistakes like I did when I was in college.
It's awesome. That's a really great example of it. I love that story. All right, so trivia question. And I said this one quick. Let's see, my computer's not moving for me. All right, I said this one kind of quick. So if y'all don't get the first part of this answer, then we will. I'll ask a bigger one, but I mentioned a beach that my family goes to every year. Can anyone remember the name of the beach? And oh my gosh, Kim Langdon, that's amazing. Woohoo!
Congratulations, Kim. I got my audio to work. Hey, guys.
Kim is either really on top of it this presentation, or I've mentioned this to her another time during meetings. So.
And we miss you.
All right. Cool. All right, well, we will open up to questions, concerns, grievances, and just see anything. And this doesn't have to be only on family brand and family constitution. You know, a lot of our presentations are much more granular. I'm doing one later this week going through current investment strategy and also a planning idea. But, you know, this is very high level, but I think very, very important, because this is who you are through all the changes. And one thing we can control and keep constant is that person that you become, and in turn, the way you can influence the ones you love. So we can open up to questions. It can be on this. It can be on another, either estate planning or financial related topic. Anybody?
Hi, David and Amber. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Wanda. How you guys doing? David, you had started speaking about, I guess, families with businesses, and one, I guess, the part, I guess, one person in or family, one person in the family may not do what the Constitution had requested or required each family member to do. Do you or Amber have some insights on how you navigate through that situation when you have that type of situation?
Yeah. Well, Amber, I think that's a little bit more in your wheelhouse, so why don't you take that one?
Okay. So normally when you do planning, if you get some help, you always have backups for, I mean, even if I have something where there's two siblings and parents want both of them to be in charge of something, who governs when there's a tie, when no one knows, like when one person thinks one way, one person thinks another? Like there are different things you can do where they have to go to another family member to try and mediate or figure out how to handle the conflict, because sometimes you can't prevent conflict. But if you try and go through as many scenarios as possible, then you can outline what to do if someone doesn't follow the rules 100%. For example, in estate planning with the trust, there's always a trustee, but you can have a trust protector, which is a third uninterested party who, you know, the beneficiaries or someone can go to when the trustee may not be doing things according to what the person who created the trust would like. And that can kind of prevent having to go to court with family members and making things sticky. So there are things that you can put in place that could be checks and balances. But I mean, it's always good to, while everyone loves each other and everything is nice, to try and plan for the worst scenario, just so that, you know, you have all that outlined.
Yeah. Well, and I think of the Constitution aspect as being different than legal documents, and I think there's a purpose for both. So, like, to me, you know, a Constitution is really important for things like my wife and I's weekly financial meeting, the percentage that we save and the percentage that we give. Because those two things really have no legal ramifications. They're just how we're going to live. And then you go a step towards businesses. And anytime you're really moving something of value from one place to another, I think a constitution's good, but I would also overlay that with legal documents. But, no one's going to ever give me a legal document that says I have to give X amount to my church, or a legal document that says I have to meet with my wife once a week to discuss our budget. But it's still nice to have that stuff laid out. And I loved what you said about the trust protector, Amber. That's really wise.
Yeah, there was a will in place, but things still didn't work out. So, thank you, though.
Depending on how long ago this is, I would say Amber could be a good resource to review that for you, possibly, and see if it's possible for things to work out differently.
Absolutely, would be happy to. I mean, because sometimes the thing about the will is, while it's contestable, so oftentimes when you go to court. So depending on what the provisions are in there, if different things are set up, you can try and make it where individuals can't contest the provisions you outline. But if you don't have that in there, then it can be subject to dispute. So yeah, I'd be happy to take a look. No cost.
All right, thank you for the
Thank you.
question. Anybody else got something? Juliana, can I put you on the spot?
Sure. Go for it.
All right, and I hope you don't mind me saying this. Different people are more and more personal than others.
No, of course not.
When I think about a family brand, and this is kind of an interesting little side story on what a brand is, and maybe this is a little bit on a constitution. It's hard to know exactly. That's why these two go together. But I look at your journey here at Merit as being very much aligned with this, because for those of you that may know this story, may not, Juliana, and this is an interesting story of how this can affect somebody both financially and on a personal level. Juliana started with us, everything was going really well, and then she had a family member that needed her to come work for their business. Just my 2 cents looking at it, that probably wasn't the exact place that Juliana would thrive, but culturally, that's what you did in that family. And then later you came back to us. Tell us a little bit about that journey, if you don't mind.
Well, my family member, my aunt, who was like my second mother who raised us, was sick. And so at the time, she wasn't sure if she had the right people in place. If you guys know, we have a clothing company, a family clothing company called Edge/No Style. You probably see it in a lot of the malls in Georgia. And so my aunt asked me, my cousin, and my other cousin to come work for her to kind of help her and support her in case anything happened. Of course, I love Merit. I still remember crying to the CEO and Rick saying, I don't want to go, but I feel like this is the right thing to do because family comes first. And I would never want anything to be jeopardized because my family, basically, that's what helped us to go to college and be successful. So quickly I realized that was not what I wanted to do because I didn't know I was going to be working at a warehouse. And then also my aunt didn't tell me that it was going to be a family reunion Monday through Friday. So it was my aunt, my uncle, my cousin, his wife, my other cousin, her boyfriend, my great uncle, and my great aunt. They literally fought about Burger King at one point. And I was like, I can't do this. We have to keep it professional. My cousin threw a burger at my other cousin because they were mad at lunch. And, I was trying to do my job. And then I realized that, at some point, my aunt feel better. And this is something that they love and they thrive. So I just told them that I'm going to be looking for other opportunities because I think that this was way too much emotionally for me to be focused and be productive. And then, of course, we had an opportunity to come back to Merit because there was a job position. And then I came back and, I love every aspect of it. I think Merit is my extended family. David's my brother, basically, or my work husband, whatever you want to call it. So It's interesting to know. I think that it's important to have, whether it's a family brand or constitution, a good balance. You know, if you can work with your family, that's great. Kudos to you. I think you guys have so much patience and flexibility, but if not, that's okay too. So, but yeah, now I'm here 7 years, guys.
Cool. Well, thank you. And I think it's an interesting story. And one issue that I think I parallel to a lot of our clients is I hear some of our clients, giving gifts to children, but sometimes leaving strings attached. And I'm not sure that's the best thing from maybe having that in writing could remind the clients that, all right, if I'm going to give them this gift, it just needs to be outright and not necessarily something I try to leverage over their behavior. Or maybe you want to do that. I don't know. But just, being intentional about that, because sometimes parents can and family members can not realize the amount of influence they have over others.
Oh, my aunt did that all the time. She was the master manipulator and literally would give us money and be like, okay, well, I gave you all this money, so that means you have to work 7 days. And I'm like, so there's no PTO? And she's like, what's a PTO? You work 7 days.
Juliana, I don't think you were gonna have any. If you kept working with them, there weren't going to be any Thanksgiving dinners. I tell you, your face says it all.
No, yeah, I mean, they do it well. Don't get me wrong. Like, I love my family. I love seeing them. I just don't like seeing them at work.
Right.
Sounds like she's running an Asian sweatshop in Atlanta.
If you've seen the Netflix TV show called Kim's Convenience, it says Kim's Convenience Store. You work 7 days. They're open
That
7
show is
days.
hilarious.
That's very legit.
All right. Anybody else? If not, I'll wrap us up. All right. Well, if you have any questions or want follow-up, myself from an investment and kind of holistic perspective, Amber from a holistic and more state specialty or asset protection perspective, business law as well. We find outside of these types of presentations, our clients have really 5 key concerns, and trying to address those and address each of those uniquely and individually and personally is something we're very passionate about. It's concerns with their investments, are those being managed correctly? Concern with tax mitigation and cash flow, or is their wealth being enhanced correctly? Concern with wealth transfer and giving money to the next generation, is that being done correctly? Concern with asset protection. The worst thing that could happen is you put all this effort into building wealth and then have it unjustly taken away. And then last, and possibly most important, leveraging the charitable gifts for the causes and things that you care about the most and for your own tax benefit on those strategies.